I am by training a lawyer. I've worked in several global law firms, mostly doing corporate transactions and project finance, which means doing economic development projects around the world. I specialize in the former Soviet Union and Africa. In addition to owning my own law firm right now, I also own a consulting company called Croissance, Aframer, which for the French speakers, you know that translates to growth between America and Europe. In that capacity, we consult with African leaders, preferably in democratic countries, who are trying to undergo legislative change, trying to democratize, or to improve the governance in their countries. My tie to Turkey is that I think it's the greatest place in the world. I am the chair of the Duke University Islamic Studies Center, and in that capacity get to go to Istanbul about once a year, and I wish it were more often. That's who I am, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my career and how I got there in the course of my talk. You've probably all heard the apocryphal story of the Oxford professor, an eminent philosophy professor, who gave an exam on which the final exam's question, only one, was why? It's a good philosophy question, right? And only one student received an A on this exam, and he was the student who questioned, why not? Now, from the time we speak as human beings, we ask why. If you've ever had a 4-year-old, you know that the question why is about all that comes out of their mouth for about 2 years. The question of why is really integral to our humanness. It's behind all discovery, it's behind our curiosity. All discoveries that are made come from asking, why is something the way that it is? It's behind all of our personal relationships, it's behind great discoveries, it's behind business decisions. So we ask ourselves why throughout our entire lives. So we know the importance of asking why, but what about its antithesis? Asking why not? Now that can mean a lot of different things. One place that we are used to hearing why not is the famous quote that's often attributed to Robert F. Kennedy, but was in fact from George Bernard Shaw, which goes, people see things as they are and ask why. I see things that never were and ask why not. Now, used in that question, why not, is a challenge to the status quo. It's saying we can do things in a way that has never been done before. Why don't we try new ways of doing things? And sometimes those things that are new ways of doing it seem kind of silly or ridiculous. NASA, for many, many years, was looking for a way to land the Mars rover on Mars, which has a very thin atmosphere, and therefore the parachutes that they normally use to land their crafts would not be enough to cushion the rover when it landed. So after doing all the physics of acceleration and deceleration and weight ratios and all these technical studies, one brilliant scientist said, and I'm sure he was hesitant to say it, if we use airbags in cars to slow down the momentum of people, why can't we just put airbags all over the rover and bounce it until it stops? And as you may know, that's exactly what they did. Now, I'm sure when he said this, someone turned to him and said, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. But this ended up not only working, but it has become the norm for landing rovers on other planets for the last 10 or 15 years. It's an outside-of-the-box solution, but it worked. Very often, we make assumptions just because other people have taught us to make those assumptions. Is everyone familiar with the old nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Nowhere in Humpty Dumpty does it say that he's an egg. Yet when you think of Humpty Dumpty, you think of an egg, don't you? And that's because everybody assumes he's an egg. Every picture that you've ever seen of Humpty Dumpty, he's an egg. So that's what we think of without questioning. While living and working in Poland in the early 2000s, I constantly heard about how expats, when they moved back to the US or to another country, would give their furniture, their clothing, the things they didn't want to move, to orphanages or other charities there in Warsaw. And that this was a wonderful thing to do, and, you know, aren't we great for doing this? But it occurred to me, well, that's great for the orphanages in Warsaw, but what about the orphanages, the homes for old veterans, the homes for the disabled and differently abled out in the rural areas? And it turned out they never got donations. They depended only upon the very, very small stipend that they received from the Polish government. So I thought, well, why can't we make it easier for expats to donate things to people out in the rural areas? It can't be that hard. It's just a matter of them bringing things to one place, and then we'll deliver them. And that's the way that the Talizman Foundation was born, Fundacja Talizman. Don't try to read it, it's in Polish. And if any of you can read Polish, I'm really impressed. Fundacja Talizman was born out of an effort to put together expats and their generous spirit with those who really, really needed these items. We went to orphanages in rural Poland that were diapering babies with newspaper because they had no diapers. When we found ones that did have diapers, they were reusing them. My husband at the time was the manager of Procter & Gamble, and he arranged for my charity to receive all of the diapers and toothpaste and shampoo and things that were in damaged packaging, because you can't send a damaged package to the grocery store to be sold. So we ended up with literally truckloads of diapers, with pallet after pallet after pallet of diapers, shampoo, toothpaste, cleaners, detergents, and we took this in along with items from lots of other companies. Marriott gave us all of their bedding and their china when it turned over every 2 years. Lafarge, the building company from France, agreed to help several orphanages rebuild play areas. And we received a great donation from IBM, who donated about 150 computers, which we took out to the rural areas and made sure that each orphanage school had at least a couple of computers that they could teach the kids on. One of the great things that we did with Talizman was with the Colorado Ski Areas Association. If you've been to Aspen or Vail or any of these fabulous ski resorts, you know that the instructors have these wonderful jackets, you know, that say Vail or on the side, or Aspen Ski School. Very fancy. They're all made by Ralph Lauren. They're beautiful. They have the pants and the gloves and the hats. Well, it turns out that what used to happen to those is at the end of the season, they got burned. They were burned in an incinerator. The reason being that Ralph Lauren, understandably, doesn't want his stuff out on the black market. He doesn't want to see real Ralph Lauren being sold on the street corners in New York City. So we partnered with the Colorado Ski Areas Association, and with Ralph Lauren's permission, all of those leftover jackets, ski pants, hats, gloves, many of which had never been opened before, were shipped to Poland, free of charge to us by a logistics company that donated their services. And we went out into rural areas and gave those coats out to people who didn't have coats, children who would not be able to play outside during the winter because they had no coats. Old people who lived in homes for the elderly who couldn't go outside most of the year, which is a little chilly in Poland, because they could catch cold very easily. So we know that those things went to fantastic people who really needed them. Now, why not is a question that can be used in a second way. We've talked about how it challenges the status quo. The second way is saying, why not, to people who tell you you can't do something. You can't possibly know anything about business if you don't have an economics degree. You can't possibly be a good mom if you're working at the same time at a big law firm. All professional women have faced this at one time or another. I hope and pray that you young women never face this. Unfortunately, I think you will. And those of us who are over 40 have had to deal with this over and over and over. This kind of why not is actually asking, well, why can't I do something? And many times in my career, I have had someone tell me you can't possibly do something, but one sticks out in particular. I was told by the managing partner of a major global law firm, one of the largest and most prestigious in the world, that I couldn't move back from Moscow to the United States because I couldn't possibly hack it in Washington, D.C., being the primary caretaker of 2 small children. So the first thing that went through my mind when the partner said this was, that's illegal. You can't say that to me. And the second thing that went through my mind is, maybe he's right. You know, maybe I can't do it all. Maybe I've just been lucky so far and this can't possibly continue. But then the third thing was, well, why not? I'll show you. And that is when I left the firm and went on to the Obama campaign, where I served as the operations director for international affairs. Worked on the campaign for a year and a half, and at the end of that decided to start my own firm, which I now run. We have offices in Paris, Brussels, Dakar, Senegal, and Moscow, and we are doing fascinating work that I couldn't have done at the firm. I'm doing business consulting that the firm never would have let me do. So it has turned out to be, I think I have shown him, and he knows where I am now. Another usage of why not is a question that you ask yourself in order to make a good decision. When you have a decision to make, you sit down and ask yourself, why should I do this? Why shouldn't I do this? About 6 years into my law practice, I had an opportunity to become a law professor. I had gone to Duke University undergrad, and I had received an offer to work at the University of North Carolina School of Law. If any of you understand the rivalry between Duke and UNC, you know that this was like being asked to turn traitor. And I thought this through because if I left the law firm after 6 years and became a faculty member, I might never be able to get back into the law again. I might be stuck. And it could be that I would love being a professor and love being stuck there, but I didn't know. So I weighed all these pros and cons, the whys and the why nots, and tried to mitigate them by saying, okay, well, I'm going to take pro bono cases while I'm a professor, and I'm going to teach a clinical class in trial advocacy. And it ended up being a really great respite for me for 6 years to be a professor. And I think that was the first job I've ever had that I felt like I was born to do this. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I encourage you to say, why not, to as many opportunities as you can. Just saying yes to things that I had no idea if I was capable of has led me to a lot of terrific things in my life. I've worked on 6 presidential campaigns, and at the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know how elections ran, and I didn't know how grassroots politics worked. But eventually I got there and ended up a senior official on the Obama campaign in 2008. Other things I've done by saying why not: bungee jumping, parasailing, skydiving. I was in high school, I skipped a week of my senior year in high school to wait in line at a radio station for Rolling Stones tickets, and with my mom's permission. Things that I never thought I would have the chance to do, I've been able to do because I said yes to opportunities. There have certainly been times when I thought, oh my, I cannot possibly take on one more thing. And I took on one more thing anyway. And it ended up being fabulous. So I encourage you to just say, why not, whenever you can. A few years ago, a palliative care nurse published a book about the 5 regrets that people have at the end of their lives. And the most often cited regret at the end of one's life is, why didn't I do something I should have done? Why didn't I go after that job that I really wanted? Why didn't I leave that job that I hated? Why didn't I leave on Fridays and go to my child's soccer games? Why didn't I tell my best friend that I love her? It would be awful to be on your deathbed in the final moments of your life asking yourself, why didn't I do the things I love with the people that I love? One of the most often cited reasons for why people don't do things that they should do is fear. The fear of failure, the fear of looking silly, the fear of what people will think of you. And these fears are valid, and everyone has them. In the professional world, we're starting to recognize that failure can actually be a good thing if you take it as a learning opportunity. The risk of failure is hard and it's scary. And I would encourage you to exercise your risk muscles by taking small risks. So you've always wanted to be a singer. You sing in the shower, but you've never sung in front of people. Going to karaoke with some friends is a great way to start. If you're bad, most other people are bad too. And everybody's going to give you credit for getting up there and trying, right? If you have always wanted to learn to play tennis, go into your garage and hit against the garage door until you have the confidence to go out and hit against a backboard in public. If you've always wanted to play golf, buy a bunch of those little plastic golf balls and go to a park and hit the balls until you feel confident that you can make contact every time. So if you ask yourself what the worst thing is that could happen, often it's really not that bad. The worst thing that can happen when you sing karaoke is that you're really terrible and people laugh, but they're laughing with you because they're no better than you are. And in fact, in many cases, much, much worse. Getting past the reasons why you shouldn't do something is often the biggest impediment to doing great things. So figure out the whys and the why nots of something and have the confidence to just say, why not? I'll try this new thing. Success is the result of our actions, not our wishes. To be successful, you must act on your wishes. Successful people ask, why not? When they're faced with challenges, instead of saying, that's too hard, I don't know if I can do that, people might think badly of me if I don't do it well. But successful people look at the challenges and say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to take the risk of looking silly or failing, because if I fail, I will learn something from it. And others around me may learn something from it as well. So I encourage you, don't look back and ask why. Instead, look ahead and ask yourself, why not? Thank you.